So you think you've had a spiritual awakening. You proceed to research the stages, but you find that you're not fitting into any one category or any one chronology of stages. So what's going on? Welcome to this episode of Conscious Commentary. I have been wanting to talk about this for quite some time. Uh, Needless to say, I've had my own awakening, happened nearly 20 years ago. And even though at the time I wasn't looking furiously to find out what stages mine may have been aligned with that I was hearing about, obviously this was a very deep and profound experience for me. And so I thought I would share some of that with you, as well as maybe give you some ideas and some thoughts on your own introspection as to what you may be going through. First of all, what I noticed when I did some research on stages one might go through during a spiritual awakening was exhaustive. I can't recall the number, but in the hundreds of millions of blog articles and videos on different stages, things like I'll read some of them to you. Awareness. These are some of the initial stages you might go through. There's an awareness, a recognition of a higher or deeper reality. Denial, resistance, or disbelief in what's happening to you, disbelief that anything at all is going on. Then there's the stage of exploration, seeking and questioning spiritual truths. And then ultimately, hopefully, a point of surrender, letting go of ego and accepting this new spiritual norm of yours. But has that happened to you? I know for me, that was not the case at all. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Again, my awakening happened, if you'd like to call it that. At the time, I think I called it an energy breakthrough back in 2005, when I was probably the least spiritually oriented, even though I had kind of grown up in a family that supported these sorts of ideas and subjects. I was uh, deep, knee deep, I should say, in the renovation of a family home. My husband and I owned a business and very politically active and very socially active. And yet, this particular event for me came out of the blue. There wasn't really a trigger. I want to talk about triggers a little bit because that is something that is also readily discussed when it comes to what might prompt a spiritual awakening, like a life-changing event. It could be a breakup with a longtime partner, loss of a job, personal crisis and trauma, like a death in the family, a health crisis. So clearly triggers an accident where there's actually a physical impact that might trigger some sort of a peak experience. Um, and sometimes it comes out of the blue. That was the case for me. I want to share a few of the things that happened for me that I have spoken about on occasion. As a matter of fact, I'm going to leave a link for an interview that I did with Alfred Webre quite a few years ago now, where I go into exhaustive detail about how it happened for me. And then we had a really good discourse as to what my thoughts were on the significance of my event and many people that are having these sorts of experiences. I'll leave a link below. But I can tell you that, again, as I had mentioned earlier, for me, whatever was happening, it arrived unannounced. But, and this is back in November, I'll be specific, November 5th of 2005. When it happened, I felt an immediate sense of acceptance, believe it or not. There was no denial. I didn't know exactly what was happening to me, but I knew that it was coming from a place and a space outside of the personality that I knew and know as Alexis. But I accepted it. Uh, there was an instant transformation. There wasn't any time necessarily that I even recall elapsing. Uh, I went from somewhat of an egoic lifestyle, not unlike many people, not when I say egoic, not arrogant, but, focused on kind of superficial things, to, I would say, uber altruistic. I remember when I emerged from the bathroom, literally, in which this event uh, triggered itself, I came out a different person. I was not at all the same person. In fact, my sense was I've got to be helpful to others. In fact, that was one of the very powerful messages that I received initially. And so I went from somewhat egoic to immediate altruism. Now, let's talk about increased synchronicity. This is something that is indeed discussed within the space of having a peak experience. And by the way, I'll use different terms: peak experience, transformative experience. I call it an energy breakthrough. You might even equate it to a Kundalini awakening. I think that there are a spectrum of definitions, but the bottom line is it is a market shift in the way you see the world, in the way you see yourself. Priority shift, purpose shifts, or is discovered, etc. As for me, uh, again, synchronicity, psychic ability went up exponentially, including precognition, something that I have had a tendency toward even as a child. But in this span of 3 months, and that's how long it lasted for me, approximately November 5th of 2005 to the end of February 2006, I was literally in an altered state, still functioning, by the way, in normal reality, living literally between two worlds. Uh, but but definitely everything that even I had a little bit of a tinge of as a child was expanded and intensified. Synchronicity and psychic ability, telepathy. I could hear the thoughts of others. It's exhaustive, and I don't want to continue to focus on my situation. But here's the point I want to make. As I have looked over these stages, let's go over them again, of awareness. And by the way, this is what the consensus seems to be in terms of the order in which things happen. First, there's an awareness, then there's denial, then there's an exploration, then surrender, and then ultimately transformation. There could be common themes here, and I don't want to disregard that. But again, have you had what you would call a market shift in your the way you live, the way you are? You believe it to be a spiritual awakening, and yet you're not fitting into any of these categories, or at a minimum, certainly not chronologically. So for me, other things that were happening, people were treating me differently. Now, obviously, they didn't know I had any kind of experience or encounter at all. And yet, as I went about my day, still working with my husband in his business, still very politically active at the time, very part of the social set, etc. I noticed that I was hyper aware, and I noticed that the people that I had seen the day before, really, even the evening of the day this happened, I'll never forget. We had a fundraiser to attend with some of our political friends, and they were treating me differently. And it wasn't necessarily pronounced, but I could tell that there was a certain uh, demeanor about them, almost as if they saw some kind of an aura, a glow around me. I don't think they did consciously, but this was one of the things that happened to me. Walking down the street, people started smiling. They would stop and smile at me. And I even have a friend or two that noticed this, and they were aware. I had confided in them that some kind of transformation had happened to me, and they made a comment about the fact that people were kind of looking at me and smiling. So again, what is happening here? Not to digress too much, but have you noticed that? Have you noticed that not only are you feeling a shift in your own focus, in your own energy, but are other people noticing it that have no idea what you've gone through? This is something that I have not found that much about as indicative of a spiritual awakening. Finally, for me, a change in life purpose. Now, I am trained as a journalist. I've been in the business of media off and on since 1986. I've gone through many, as I said, professional incarnations, starting my career in sports broadcasting. Fast forward to 2005, where I had a business with my husband. Eventually, and not right away, it took 6 years for me to literally change that trajectory, continue with journalism. And as I recently said in an interview with Anthony Peake.
So you've had a peak experience yourself. You've had the
Indeed,
opening up.
I sure have. 2005. It's an exhaustive chronology that I'm not going to bore you all with. Well, actually, it's not that boring. But I will say, Anthony, that it lasted 3 months.
Wow.
It was sustained for 3 months and probably literally put me in the seat that I'm sitting in right now. So here's the deal. I believe this is happening to a lot of people right now, whether they know, whether you know, or not consciously, that you have undergone what is called an awakening. How might you know if you're not fitting into any of the stages that are readily discussed? I don't believe there's a manual. I don't believe there's a guidebook. I think that what you may, in fact, I would suggest that you do is ask yourself the question in silence. What is this about? What's happened to me? And what am I to do with this, most importantly? How do I want this to shift my life? Should I change my fill in the blank? Friends, my spouse, my career? A lot of people are considering that. My location. But I think rather than run to a book for guidance, what I would suggest is to ask yourself, are you having, and I'll share this with you, in the course of my uh, peak experience, sustained peak experience, there was a dialogue that was going on between myself and, I'm going to say, an other, something intelligent, something outside of the personality of Alexis. I didn't necessarily hear talking in my head, but I was getting concepts and answers being given to me. Uh, Fascinating. 24/7, frankly. Is that happening to you? This is something that I'm not hearing about that frequently in the course of the stages that one might go through in a spiritual awakening. So, to reemphasize the point, guys, this is about, forgive the cliche, a very unique, personalized journey, almost like when you're having a dream that's profound for you. And it's very interesting how dreams, whatever's controlling the dream, knows how to put exactly the right reference in front of you because it knows you so well. Well, I think it's the same thing with these sorts of experiences. They're highly personalized, highly individualized for you. And so, again, maybe it's journaling. Certainly, journaling in this regard, I think, is incredibly important to do, to be able to start to unpack what has happened and what to do with it, most importantly, because it's about integrating, right? As I've said before, when you have an experience this profound, particularly if it comes out of the blue, and oftentimes it does, it's not about fleeing the old world because you're still here. It's about acceptance and embracing what's happened to you and learning to balance the two, to bring equilibrium to both. That is the most important thing. And moreover, to be able to use what has happened to you to make the life that you're living here even more satisfying, more joyful, more fulfilling, and certainly living in purpose. Speaking of integrating, I got to drop this one. Coming right up, as a matter of fact, this weekend, the weekend of the 27th and 28th, I will be speaking, uh, doing a workshop, as a matter of fact, a very interactive workshop, Between Two Worlds: How to Synthesize Your Extraordinary Encounters with Everyday Life. I'll be doing this as part of a great event that Tracy Garbutt Dolan and her hubby, Richard Dolan, who were just on the show, are having. It's a weekend retreat called the Consciousness Connection. Uh, Gosh, what a lineup. Anthony Peake, who I just had on the show, is going to be talking about near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and UFO encounters. Are they linked? Russell Targ is going to be a part of this weekend. Obviously, remote viewing will be a central part of some of the lectures and presentations that'll be going on. JK Ultra and others. It's going to be fantastic, and I'm just so honored that I was asked to give this interactive workshop where I'll be touching on a lot of the points that I brought up today, having to do with how do we integrate a spiritual awakening or other extraordinary encounters. There are a range into everyday life because we still have to live everyday life. So I'll make sure I have a link below for that. I think it's going to be a fantastic weekend. I want to hear from you. Let me know. Have you had what you would deem a spiritual awakening? Are you not fitting into the stages that you have learned about? And if not, that's okay. You know if something powerful has happened to you. This is a process. There's no going back. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'll leave you with this. I think for anyone that has undergone something like this, it's a blessing. Even though there may be some hard knocks along the way, because you're going perhaps from one worldview to another, from one lifestyle to another, from one life to another, you are being upgraded. I'd call it an upgrade. And I think it's no accident that it's happening to so many people right now because the planet is upgrading. So embrace it, enjoy it, don't look back, and trust it has happened for a reason. You're not alone. And yeah, oh, speaking of that, here's something else I want to leave you with. Look, there are so many support groups out there having to do with everything from people that are feeling themselves to have contact with non-human intelligence, which can also be indicative of an awakening, to spiritual awakening groups. In fact, I found a few over on Facebook that I think you might benefit from. So maybe I can link those as well. The other thing I also want to mention to you is I'm happy to say I'm back to doing one-on-one coaching. Yes, indeed. I call it conscious coaching, where I deal with these issues in a myriad ways. People that have had awakenings, or maybe people that have had these proclivities of a sort of spiritually centric life for a lifetime, but they still feel like they have to be in the closet with it. So do check the link below as well. I'm so happy to finally be able to take on a few clients. I'm only taking on a few, at least for this year, but it's been really gratifying to work with some extraordinary individuals to help them help themselves. So I think I'll leave it there for now. I hope you got something out of this. I do want to hear from you, so please comment below. And if you feel so inclined, consider subscribing to Higher Journeys. I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.